Don't worry, one of these days I'll figure out how to pop up something to my goofy face at the beginning of the show. And me being surprised about the music actually working. But for now, this is what you get. Welcome in. Tuesday. Tim Hill, unrestricted, free agent. Oh, we're going to have some fun today. Anthony, up first on the YouTube live stream with a good morning UFAs as well. Turning it up. All right. Hall of Fame. What about you? Who are your Hall of Famers? South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, kind of headlining things in the state of South Carolina from a sports perspective last night. A couple of classes officially inducted, or with the official ceremonies, I should say, because of the class of 2020. The COVID situation did not allow for them to be inducted personally into that South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, which there is no physical building anyway, but they just didn't get to have the ceremony back in the day. So the class of 2020, class of 2022 making their way onto the stage last night, officially putting on those jackets and in the Hall of Fame. Justin Stevens, welcome to you as well this morning on the YouTube live stream with a Good Morning UFAs. Glad everybody is in today, and we're that news story, right? Todd Ellis, Sidney Rice, CJ Spiller from Clemson, Peter Boulware from Spring Valley High School, went on to star at Florida State and the Baltimore Ravens for a bunch of years in the NFL. Back in town now with the car dealership and the whole thing. These are the big names from last night, and was watching the recap of some of the speeches there on abccolumbia.com there from my buddy Mike Gillespie and Cam Gaskins. I know we're doing the hard work there. Interesting to hear some of their comments, but I've been to a bunch of those ceremonies through the years. I think 2003 was the first time. I think Gorman Thomas, the Milwaukee Brewers slugger from back in the day, kind of headlined that class, or was one of the headliners, and that was a really cool kind of introduction to just South Carolina sports in general for me at the professional level. Going back to ABC Columbia, it was WOLO at the time, TV channel 25. But it's a cool event if you've never been to see some of the legends. And Bobby Crimmins was kind of that guy for me then. I just remember saying, hey, man, that's Bobby Crimmins, the guy I've been watching my entire life, all these ACC basketball games, and having loved Kenny Anderson and Dennis Scott, Lethal Weapon 3 with Brian Oliver, and knowing his connection to the University of South Carolina, but been too young to have seen him play or be part of those days. And then obviously the flirtation with the Carolina job, and the flip-flop and the whole thing. He was just kind of a legendary character that I had never been around to see him part of the ceremony. He's a member and pretty active in the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, I believe. That was a really cool kind of welcome to the next level of covering sports moment for me. All these guys right here. Craig says Sidney Rice was on the radio last night with Phil Kornblut, and Sidney is an amazing story too, an amazing example to me of watching a guy grow up. Like, I watched him win a state championship in basketball against Lower Richland at the Colonial Life Arena. A really good basketball player at Gaffney. Obviously, the football stuff speaks for itself, right? And he is such an odd thing happened to him to start his career as a Lou Holtz recruit, and in warm-ups, I think hurts his knee, misses his entire first year. Then Steve Spurrier comes in, and as a wide receiver in college football, to go from Lou Holtz to Steve Spurrier, mind-boggling, right? And then Sidney Rice was just kind of immediately dominant in his college career. Only 2 years at Carolina, and as good as it gets. But from my perspective as a TV guy, to try to get the story of the game and the whole thing, he didn't want to have anything to do with it. He just didn't have much to say at all. And to have seen him grow from a college football phenom to star in the NFL, and then now he's gone on to so many different things. How he got out relatively early from his NFL career, which continues to be kind of the norm these days. But to make sure your health is the most important thing. And good morning to you, RL, as well, to have battled some concussion issues, but to eject from a really good NFL career, which included a Super Bowl ring, even though I don't think he played in the Super Bowl with the Seahawks when they won it, but was on the team that year, but had the injury issues. And then go on to be a restaurant owner, chain restaurant owner, I think, and now going on to be a wine connoisseur, and just to see how he's matured through the years is really impressive stuff. And happy for Sidney Rice. Todd Ellis is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, right? He came in as parade All-American, big-time high school quarterback back in the 80s, and tons of pressure on him. Played immediately as a freshman and had a headlining career that didn't necessarily see a ton of, I shouldn't say a ton of success, but had its ups and downs is probably the best way to put that, right? I mean, South Carolina was a top 10 ranked college football team when he was the quarterback back, I think it was in 1987, going to Miami and almost beating Miami in the Orange Bowl with Michael Irvin and the whole thing. That's what really sticks out to me. And then obviously staying in town, becoming a lawyer, getting a shot in the NFL, still the last quarterback drafted at South Carolina, being the voice of the Gamecocks for, man, he's done it for a long time now. I think it's 20 years or somewhere approaching that. Being always connected, always kind of the face of South Carolina during his playing days and even afterwards. So a different type of Carolina experience for him. And then CJ Spiller from the Clemson perspective. Remember, I did a recruiting special on TV where CJ Spiller dramatically did not choose Florida or Florida State like a lot of people thought he would as an absolute phenom in high school. He was just that guy. And you could tell in his Clemson career as well. And good morning to you, Mark. Howdy all, he says on the YouTube live stream. But Spiller, absolutely electric, and even Gamecock fans at the time. I mean, that's how you know it's the ultimate compliment. I feel like there are only a select number of these guys in their career where even the rival fans have to say, no, I mean, that guy's really good. And I kind of, if you get him in a quiet moment of honesty, I kind of enjoy even watching that guy play. He's so good. CJ Spiller was that guy, I think, from the Gamecock fan perspective. Admittedly, just because he's so electric. Unfortunately, battled some injuries, especially kind of cut short his NFL career, and now he's rejoined the Clemson staff the last several years. But a Clemson guy kind of through and through. Once Dabo Swinney, Tommy Bowden at the time as the head coach, but Dabo Swinney, I think, as the kind of personal recruiter there, convinced him to go up to Clemson instead of a Florida school. Worked out pretty well for CJ Spiller and ends up in a South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And Peter Boulware, a unique Columbia story, right? Getting out of town, out of the state, going to Florida State, the dominant program at the time, being a dominant college football player, then going on to a pretty dominant NFL career as well. Now circling back and being back in town in the city he grew up in the Columbia area. So interesting mix of Hall of Famers last night for the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, but it got me thinking, how can we have a little fun with that? So I've thrown it out on Twitter, wondering, what about your first ballot Hall of Fame class? I put 5 on there because I'm pretty sure that's how the original Baseball Hall of Fame did it, with 5 original members. And I don't know why the number 5 just stuck in my head here, but so I got 5 classifications for your votes. Number 1, from the world of sports, whether it's a team, player, or coach, I went Michael Jordan. Number 2, world leader or historical figure. I'm going to say that a lot of us would choose Jesus here, so let's take that as the given, right? And we'll throw in someone else. I went Abraham Lincoln. Number 3, a fictional character, TV show, movie, whatever you want there. That was a tough one for me, but I went kind of a combination, right? Seinfeld is kind of a character and the show, and an actual person as well. So to me, it combined all these things. To me, greatest TV show of all time, and I don't think it's even that close. I guess maybe I'd put The Office somewhere close to it, but it's still not quite the same. I mean, just the the cultural phenomenon and when it hit in my life, like this was high school years for me going into college. Never forget my first year at college. Like that's what we would do. We would just go to the lunch table and we would talk about Seinfeld. Did you see the latest one? And man, that's exactly how it applies to my life and the whole thing. And we talked to not just I was trying to play baseball at the time, not just the teammates, but like the man, the trainer, I remember was a big fan, and it's just how cross-generational. My dad's a big fan of the show. We can always identify with it as well. So Seinfeld gets my vote there. And then for food, 5, a write-in vote. So I went barbecue with the food. Had it yesterday for lunch out on the golf course. So versatile, so good. Being a Carolina guy too, it's also a little unique, right? I think a lot of people from outside of our area here, they don't understand it. They didn't grow up with it. So to me, that's another reason that I'm holding on to that. And a part of who I am, my family is. A lot of my family from Eastern North Carolina, so we do the vinegar based, and I know it's a whole deal and the whole thing. I mean, I'll eat any barbecue. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to fight you if you swear by one or the other. I prefer the Eastern North Carolina like vinegar base, but I'm a equal opportunity barbecue eater, so I went with barbecue there. And then the write-in vote, and this one might also be a given, but I went mom for obvious reasons. Having such a massive impact, and couldn't be here without her, and just went. I'm guessing most of us would probably go personal votes for a write-in vote, but feel free to go wherever you want to go, man. If a musician or who knows? I mean, so many people come from different perspectives on this. It might just be sports. It might be more sports there. So RL, I'm trying to figure out what you're saying there. All sports, historical figure, food, fictional character, and write-in. Yeah, those are the categories. So one for each is what I'm saying would be your class, your first ballot class in your personal Hall of Fame. For instance, Justin Stevens weighed in on this thing. I can pop up his tweet here too, even. Here's where he's going on that one. Let's get that comment out of there. And he went Wayne Gretzky from sports. He went Leonardo da Vinci. If Jesus is the given there, he's going to go with Leonardo da Vinci, the Renaissance man, one of the originals. Good for you, sir. This one shocked me because when I first saw this, I thought, oh, man, Justin, you misspelled Santa Claus, I think. I don't think you put the E on the end of that in the historical sense. And I thought it was going to be his historical guy. It was like, oh, yeah, Santa Claus. That was St. Nicholas. Okay. But this is actually the movie Santa Claus? Like with Tim Allen? Out of all the fictional characters, TV shows, or movies, Justin went Santa Claus. This is why I love asking a question like this, because in my wildest dreams, nowhere ever would I have guessed that would be a vote for anyone. Steak, obviously, for the food. Water is a great write-in vote. Excellent work. Water is life, sir. Well done. So that's from Justin Stevens on Twitter. At Tim Hill UFA is where we wrote that one in, or I popped that up on Twitter today. Let's see if I can get that thing out of there now. All right. Trying to get the technology working, and appreciate your patience with that. Love to hear where you guys want to go. Yep. So RL was just making sure he had the categories there. Yep. Number 1, sports. 2, historical figure. Number 3 is the fictional character one. Movie, sports, TV show, whatever you want to do there. 4 is the food, and then 5 is the write-in. So that's written out again on Twitter. Got it scrolling at the bottom of the video stream as well. If you guys would like to play along with the kind of outside of the box poll question here. I see Twitter up and rolling right now. We got CG also weighing in on this thing, going Larry Bird as the first vote. Also assuming you can't put in Jesus for the historical figure, he goes with Winston Churchill. Okay, good one. Number 3, along with my Seinfeld vote, he just went Kramer. He didn't even write Cosmo in there, but just went Kramer. It's a great one. 4, fried chicken. Tough to argue with. And 5, the write-in vote. This is another reason why I love asking this question, because it never dawned on me. But again, a great explanation and a great write-in vote from CG here on the Twitter for his first ballot Hall of Fame. The write-in vote goes to Ted Williams, the combo of baseball and being the fighter pilot in 2 wars, or for a couple of years there in World War II, I thought it was. Great stuff from CG. So Larry Bird, Winston Churchill, Cosmo Kramer, fried chicken, and Ted Williams, his first ballot Hall of Fame. Love it. Because this Hall of Fame stuff, I mean, we see it all across the board in sports, right? And it's really interesting to see how different people will react. We had on Corey Miller last week, I believe it was, former Gamecock standout, longtime New York Giant. And he recently got inducted into the University of South Carolina Hall of Fame. Oh, and Justin says he actually didn't mean to put in the E in Santa Claus. So maybe he just means that fictional character. Okay. It's fictional character of Santa Claus based on the historical character of St. Nicholas. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you, Justin, for the explanation there. But University of South Carolina. So, and when I first got into this, I was confused myself. I was like, okay, the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, that's different than the University of South Carolina Hall of Fame, because that's also based on athletics, but they're separate entities, right? The South Carolina Athletics Hall of Fame is just the entire state, and I think they do a great job trying to get the entire perspective of the state. They try to get representatives from not just the University of South Carolina and Clemson, even though typically someone from each school is represented in each class, but also a guy like Peter Boulware, who's from the state of South Carolina, yet played all of his college football and NFL football outside the state. But so South Carolina natives are a big emphasis here. Also, if non-South Carolina natives played their college sports in the state, made their name for themselves athletically in the state of South Carolina, then they're eligible as well. So a really interesting kind of mix, a group making up the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame. And last night's class, or couple of classes, because of that 2020 exception with the COVID issues and being delayed until last night, a pretty good representation. I mean, pretty solid class. You can put that last night up against a lot of other nights for star power and all the memories they invoke from us about careers, right? Specific moments. Sidney Rice, what pops out in my head is that first win the Gamecocks got in Knoxville. He made a touchdown catch in the back of the end zone towards the end of that one that helped lead to, I should say, the Josh Brown game-winning field goal that just eked over the crossbar to help Carolina win that game up in Knoxville. I want to say 05-ish, 06, somewhere in there. So that's, 15 plus years ago. But it just feels like it could have been yesterday, having been there as a TV nerd right there in that end zone with the camera on the shoulder. Oh, and just the feel of Steve Spurrier coming. I think that was his first trip with the Gamecocks back to Neyland Stadium. Everything he kind of brought with him, with his relationship with the Tennessee fans, having been from the state of Tennessee and yet going down to Florida to win the Heisman Trophy. So that's the one that pops in my head immediately. Todd Ellis shooting off the guns against NC State at NC State, Carter Finley Stadium, growing up in the state of North Carolina, being from the Greensboro area, kind of just like Todd was, having read the headlines, Page High School, and Todd Ellis being a high school All-American, and then choosing South Carolina, where my dad had gone to school and kind of raised us to be fans of, was really cool. And then to see him, those games were really impactful on me. I guess I was probably somewhere around 10 years old back then. So those are the ones from the Gamecock perspective that jump out at me. CJ Spiller's kickoff return in the first of the 5 games that Carolina won in a row against Clemson which I believe would be that 2009 game. I think, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Right. That's correct. The 2009 game, day game, cold, noon start, Williams-Brice, opening kick, Spiller, right down the field. And also being on the field that day, I think I was behind him, was just watching it all unfold, and just the deflation of the Williams-Brice home crowd, the elation on the Clemson sideline, and then to know that, no, a lot like Steve Spurrier said all the time, sometimes that's not good. That didn't turn out great for a lot of teams when they return the opening kick for a touchdown, and it didn't turn out great for Clemson that day either. That was the Stephon Gilmore Wildcat pass to Alshon Jeffrey, and Carolina came back and won that game. Obviously, set up the run of 5 in a row. But that's the one memory, that one. And I remember a Thursday night game against Georgia Tech that CJ Spiller just ran all over the Yellow Jackets. And this was, I think, Calvin Johnson coming, I guess maybe a couple of years after Calvin Johnson was there. He might have still been there. It's hard for me to remember, especially how his career ended up being a little shorter than most of us thought it would be in the NFL, I think. But remember that one, a lot of eyes on Clemson and Georgia Tech, and just the thunder and lightning of him and James Davis just lighting up Georgia Tech at that point. That one sticks out to me from the CJ Spiller perspective. Love to hear some of your memories of some of these guys from the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame perspective. Love that some of you are playing along with my little poll question today. RL sports vote, Deion Sanders. Great one. And I want to weigh in more on something that happened with Deion recently in a little bit. Number 2, world leader or historical figure. He goes with Albert Einstein. Okay. Big theory of relativity guy, are you? Big science guy, RL? Okay. Number 3, would never, ever, ever enter my mind that this would be someone's vote. Captain Jean-Luc Picard. I believe that's Star Trek The Next Generation, right? Patrick Stewart. I think I have that right. Never actually watched the show, more than always clicking past it. I think it was always on Fox back in the day. Maybe a CW or something else, one of those channels. Oh, never stopped. I never understood it. Never got it. I thought Patrick Stewart had some great Saturday Night Live skits. That's really the only reason I know him at all. Great accent. I guess he's a great actor, but never quite got into that. Sushi. That's a cultured vote, RL. Very interesting. I did not see that one coming. And number 5, the write-in vote for Eleanor Roosevelt. Because why not? Mark asks, are we picking a food or a food person? Hey, that's up to you, man. It's interesting that you would even ask that, because when I put food there, to me, it's pretty obvious we're doing food. But if you think food person, if that really, if you want that to make your first ballot Hall of Fame, you want someone attached to food, maybe you're one of those. That's a massive industry, right? People just turn on the TV, turn on the screen, and watch others prepare food. I don't quite get it. My kids are into like kids baking championship. I don't get it either. The stuff, those kids are amazing. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't quite get that one. Another great submission here from Mark. Again, your first ballot Hall of Fame. It's scrolling on the bottom of the screen now if you're watching the video deal, asking you favorite sports team, player, or coach for your first vote, right? Going a little outside the box for number 2, just going world leader, historical figure. Third vote, a fictional character, TV show, or movie, all in the same category there for number 3. 4, your food, which apparently Mark also translates as possible food person. And then 5, just a write-in vote, go wherever you want to go. Mark going Chipper Jones, great one. Certainly in the thought process for me, but not, I mean, no one was going over Michael Jordan from the sports perspective for me. Oh, he also goes Abraham Lincoln for number 2, the historical figure. Goes Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we just got a Star Trek vote and a Star Wars vote. And I am anti both of those things. You guys are all, and you still come search out this show and put up with me. Wow, Mark and RL. Much appreciation for putting up with my rants on that. Then he did go Guy Fieri with the food category. Apparently just a big fan. And Carmen Electra is his write-in vote. Okay. Mark says Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, a fantastic show. Makes me too hungry, though. Yeah, that's why I don't get the food stuff. Craig just going with a write-in vote on Food Person with Anthony Bourdain. Also more like a culture person, right, too, with that show. I never watched it. I'm not a food show guy, but I understand it was kind of like a travel bent to that show, right? Travel bend that exposed you to different cultures and the whole thing, and that was kind of the fascination. All right, Craig weighing in with his votes. Jim Brown, great one. Oh, and I see a bit of a trend. Well, I thought I did until number 3. Gandhi, historical figure. Good one. Tyrion Lannister. Now, which one is Tyrion? I always get confused with the Game of Thrones stuff. Watched, I think, most of it, maybe all of the episodes. Never got into the minutia of it. And the dragons always threw me for a loop, and like the White Walkers and the science fiction-y part of it I thought was a little much. I didn't think they needed it. But so is Tyrion, help me out with which one he is exactly. The Lannisters, I get confused. It's a little too broad for me, Craig, on seafood. You just went with like a category of food, which I guess when I put food up there, you go seafood. I guess that's pretty similar to sushi. Mark says Tyrion was the smaller Lannister, the little person played by Peter Dinklage. Okay. Thanks for letting me know there. And all right, if he has to choose one, scallops, well done. Well done, Craig, on the seafood. I'm with you on that. Big scallops fan, but it wouldn't just make my Hall of Fame. And his write-in vote, interestingly, goes to Tiger Woods, I think. Okay. Even as we sit here in 2022. I can understand if you're a big Tiger guy. I didn't know Craig was a big Tiger guy. People are. I've never been quite that guy. All right. I like that Troy's taking us back a little bit with, well, not that Craig didn't with Jim Brown, but he's going old school baseball vote in his personal Hall of Fame with Johnny Bench, a great one. And he seems to be one of those guys, too, that in my mind is kind of like Cal Ripken. Kind of just like almost, you almost had to like him / admire him, even if you weren't a big Red Machine Cincinnati Reds guy back in the day. But I'm coming to this a little later, so I might have that incorrect. Troy, please correct me if I'm wrong on that one, having been born in 1977 and didn't get the full perspective of the Big Red Machine and Johnny Bench's career live. For sure, read about him and tried to historically appreciate him. George Washington, the vote for number 2, first vote for George Washington. Andy Taylor. Wow. Well done, sir. Troy going with the Andy Griffith Show, but he went specifically with Andy Taylor. Like he could have gone with the show. That's why I put the show on there. I kind of went the opposite. Instead of Jerry Seinfeld from Seinfeld, I just went Seinfeld as the show there. 4 Lobster. Wow, big time. To me, so overrated. I've only had it a few times. I don't get the fascination with it. It's a giant roach, in my opinion, from the ocean. It tastes pretty good. It's not a bad thing. I wouldn't turn it down if someone handed it to me, but the cracking and the whole ceremony that goes around it, and then I'm just maybe just that cheap. Maybe Troy is not nearly as cheap as I am. And then he comes back around, brings it back, pulling the heartstrings with the write-in vote for his dad. Well done there, Troy. Really appreciate you guys playing along with the Hall of Fame concept, and hope we get more votes in as we roll on this morning. But just last night's ceremony reminded me of that, and you get really interesting speeches through the years in this thing. Well, maybe I found them to be really interesting speeches because, people come at it from so many different perspectives, like the headliners that I put on the graphic on the video portion of the show, by the way. Todd Ellis, Sidney Rice, CJ Spiller, Peter Boulware. We all are pretty familiar, I think, with these guys, their personalities and their stories, because football is king in South Carolina. It's the ones that I haven't been as familiar with. There was a Clemson soccer coach that stands out in my mind that I think told the story of his parents being immigrants to the country, and then how much kind of sports played the role in being a part of our country. Was fantastic. This was probably, I don't know, 10 plus years ago. Something like that. It just stands out in my mind. Some other notable speeches that I remember, just like a female swimmer and everything that her career meant. I think how well-rounded these South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame classes have been, I think really have opened my mind to some different stories for sure, and different athletic journeys, and probably re-emphasized to me the importance of athletics in so many different ways to so many different families, different people, to the state of South Carolina specifically, but just in so many ways that I didn't ever think of. So RL says, so no one says Pete Rose yet? See, that's the thing. You mentioned Hall of Fame and Pete Rose, right? They don't go together. And I think you would have to kind of personally consider yourself as a rebel to throw Pete Rose in your own Hall of Fame. Yeah, Mark says, yeah, Troy has to one-up us with the dad write-in vote. LOL. Mark says he's too young for Pete Rose. He seems kind of like a jerk, not knowing too much about him. I ended up reading a book about him and his case for the Hall of Fame and how he was framed. And this was before it actually came out that no, he did bet on his team and the whole thing. The jerk part there, I think, is also the reason why he was Charlie Hustle and as great as he was and had the hits record in Major League Baseball. And you have to have a certain personality a lot of times to be that kind of guy. The original grinder, I think, would be the way that I would put Pete Rose, but I'm also a little bit too young to remember the greatness. I remember the player manager days. Him setting the record is etched in my memory. Getting his record-breaking hit to pass Ty Cobb for the all-time hit record in Major League Baseball. And Troy says, Johnny Bench was my favorite player growing up. Pete Rose, my second favorite player. Interesting. So I mentioned, when did that pop up? Deion Sanders was a vote. I think RL's vote. Great story from my buddy Scott Eisberg, who's been on the show a couple times now, who is the sports director down in Charleston. And this is an example that I think we need, and needs to be a light needs to be shined on these very positive examples that come from social media that Deion Sanders just put out, that he was in Hilton Head. He wanted to know where the inner city of Hilton Head was because he's looking for some players, and he was going to Best Buy and Walmart or whatever. And the Hilton Head head coach actually hit him back and said, no, I'm at the high school right now. I'm at the field. Come see us. And he did. And it just so turned out that the Hilton Head football coach was a massive Deion Sanders fan growing up. And he said his family, the coach's family growing up, was from the Pennsylvania area, not too far from Pittsburgh, about 3.5 hours away, I guess. And he said didn't have a whole lot of money, but his dad scraped up what he could and took his son to I assume it was the Steelers and Falcons game back in the day. And they got there as soon as they would let him in. And he watched Deion Sanders specifically warm up and what the massive impact it had on him. And then to see Deion Sanders in person visiting Hilton Head High School, and now in the recruiting mode and with the Jackson State program and everything that has meant here recently with the Nick Saban stuff, the Jimbo Fisher stuff. It's awesome. Awesome to see. And amazing that Deion Sanders really is, in my mind, is the head football coach at Jackson State, and in this role in so many ways, going out and just, I mean, he had the chains going. He's still prime, right? And we saw the response that he had to the Nick Saban stuff. Don't try to have a private conversation with me if you've made the public comment. We need to have the public conversation. Love that. But then love this side of Deion as well, like being the man of his word, showing up at the high school. Obviously, he has a vested interest in trying to find some players as well, but connecting with a fan and a coach now. It's pretty cool, man. Good story. I got it up on the Twitter again, at Tim Hill UFA. If you guys want to head to the Twitter and check that story out, just a couple of minutes that Scotty put out. I believe he put it out yesterday. York weighing in. Morning, York. He just says, hey, gang, go Gamecocks. York, wondering if you would like to weigh in, too, on this personal Hall of Fame deal. Again, several Gamecocks, Sidney Rice and Todd Ellis, into the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame last night, asking you your personal first ballot Hall of Fame class. Scrolling there on the bottom of the video live stream this morning. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, how you can always check us out. If you guys have not already, would love for you to subscribe to that YouTube page. Hop on a podcast platform and follow that thing. Subscribe as well. If you miss anything, it'll come to you automatically. The audio version streaming live on Podbean every day, and then going out to all the different podcast platforms out there, Spotify, etc. And still trying to get up and rolling on the Apple Podcasts, hopefully coming soon. Don't know how that goes exactly. 2 o'clock today, 2 o'clock-ish today. Gamecocks in Florida, SEC baseball tournament. Single elimination. The Gamecocks are the number 10 seed. Florida, the number 7 seed. Get the further information about NCAA baseball right now up and rolling on the screen for you as well. That's over in Hoover, right outside of Birmingham, Alabama, where they played it forever. I put up the clip earlier today on Twitter. I thought it was hilarious yesterday. Trey Dyson, former Gamecock baseball star, now assistant coach over at North Greenville, who's getting ready to play in a super regional in the Division II tournament coming up this weekend, looking for their first ever spot in the Division II College World Series. We talked a lot about that to begin yesterday. And then I had to ask him a day ahead of today's SEC tournament opener for the Gamecocks, where they go in 500 on the season and needing to win the tournament to get into the NCAA tournament. A strange spot for sure, and not a spot that he was accustomed to at all, having won the SEC a couple of times back in his career, almost 20 years ago, right at 20 years ago or so. Why can't South Carolina, why can't the Gamecocks win in Hoover? Why 29-50 is the record all time? And he didn't have a good explanation for it. But his excuse for it was that there was always something bigger looming, and it was not the most important thing. And I think that is the very logical, rational explanation for it. That makes a lot of sense to me. In the back of your mind, especially because the opposite is true, right? Because the Ray Tanner era had so much sustained success in the NCAA tournament, where you had to win to move on, where obviously that was the important thing. There was no consolation prize. There was nothing else. If you lost, you were done. And that program, time and time again, Trey Dyson being a clutch guy himself for sure, one of those guys, coming up in the big moments. But I think as an athlete, if you have any kind of the personal explanation or example I have in my head is my high school basketball coach once asked me, hey, when I put a sub in for you and you're on the free throw line, do you miss those free throws on purpose? I said, no, man, I don't miss them on purpose. Come on, I'm trying to make them. But recognizing that, I think somewhere in the back of my brain was, hey, I don't want to go out. If I miss this thing, I need to keep playing. I didn't miss them on purpose. I promise you. I'm just not that great a shooter. But I'm guessing my percentage with getting waited to be subbed out and not, I'm thinking it was a pretty drastic difference. And somewhere in my brain, somewhere in my body, I was reacting to that. I think that happens to some extent with athletes in all sports, but especially when you get towards the end of a season. And in baseball specifically, because you have to, it's such a war instead of a battle, right? It's such of a long view. You don't have a clock on it. You're not sure how long it's going to go. When you're playing in a double elimination deal, you can be around for a long time, and you have to kind of set things up accordingly and react accordingly and be ready for the marathon that can turn into. But if there is something else afterwards, I think there's something that just naturally okay. It's not going to devastate me if I don't get this hit. It's not going to be soul crushing if we get eliminated from this tournament, because guess what? We're already out of school. And then we know we're guaranteed to keep playing, and we're going to do it at home most of the time is where the Gamecocks have been. And we're going to win because that's what's always happened here, was certainly where the program got to, going to end up going to the College World Series, or certainly have a great opportunity to do so. It's going to be fantastic. This isn't that, this being the SEC tournament. So there's a little something else. I'm not saying that when the hitters were in the batter's box that they weren't trying as hard or focusing or the whole, like, I just think they're, whatever that small percentage was, that knowing that in the back of their minds has played a difference. Also, you can't ignore the teams that have played through the years at the SEC tournament have been so good in so many ways. And especially if you are a program that goes into that thing without being locked up in the NCAA tournament or as a regional host or super regional national seed type deal, that you got something to prove. The Gamecocks just never really were that for so many years. And I think that plays into it. But still, 29-50 is hard to wrap your head around, hard for me to wrap my head around for a Gamecock record, a lot like this year's 27-27 record in the regular season. Today's game going to be a tough one against a Florida team that just took 2 out of 3 against the Gamecocks. Now, kind of strangely enough, or ironically enough, the pitchers that threw in the last game of that series on Saturday are starting today, and Will Sanders being the Gamecocks' best guy by and large. I know Noah Hall has been really good, especially of late, but certainly came into the season as that, a really proven guy. And if you got a single elimination game to continue your season, which is what today is, you throw Will Sanders out there. That's what Carolina is doing, and we'll see what happens. But to even be in this place is kind of unimaginable, I think, for a lot of Gamecock fans, and just a bit of a bummer, I think, overall, that you don't have a postseason run to latch on to look forward to be a part of, because of everything, all the fun that can be, man. It can be so much fun. But certainly, we'll check out today's game. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and we'll see what happens, because the winner of today's game moves on to play Texas A&M, also moves on to the double elimination portion of the SEC tournament. So all these tournaments are a little bit unique, have their own unique setups. The SEC has 12 teams, but 8 teams play today, 4 games, single elimination style, and 4 teams will advance to a now 8-team double elimination tournament. If that makes sense, the top 4 seeds have gotten the bye automatically into that double elimination portion, which is why it is so important to have the regular season kind of cash in the bank right now. From the ACC perspective, it's interesting how they've always done the round robin pool play, 4 pools, 4 3-team pools. So they also have a 12-team tournament. And Clemson is in as the number 12 seed, playing with the number 8 seed North Carolina. That game is tonight, 7 p.m. And then they get to rest a day on Wednesday. They'll play the top seed Virginia Tech at 7 p.m. on Thursday. This tournament in Charlotte, where I was just at a Knights game for the first time the other day. Great stadium. First time I'd been there. I know I'm late to the party there. It's not that new of a stadium, but great venue. Not quite sure how the ACC tournament will be attended. And, conference tournaments in general, basketball is the one that we talk about the most, right? And how dramatic those things can be. Chattanooga and Furman with the buzzer beater this past year, the Southern Conference, to help Lamont Paris and company cash their ticket to the NCAA tournament, then almost upset Illinois. He parlays that into the job at South Carolina. Kind of crazy to think about. That buzzer beater doesn't go. What happens in his career? Does this? I think it's hard to make the jump that Lamont Paris would still be the South Carolina head basketball coach right now. Who knows? But the value of those conference tournaments, or how much value, how massive a value we place on the conference basketball tournaments, where you can be a regular season winner, right? We've seen this happen a lot of times in the Southern Conference, especially. UNC Greensboro has done it a time or two. Well, that win 30 games in the regular season, lose maybe a handful, but they get upset in the conference tournament and then get left out of the NCAA tournament. Doesn't seem quite fair. Seems overvalued, the conference tournament in college basketball. College baseball, it seems about right because I guess maybe we don't pay as much attention to smaller schools. I'm guessing Chad Holbrook, if I were to talk to him right now, would say, no, college baseball tournament's still overvalued. If his team has run through the Colonial Athletic Conference, I believe they're in, which is not just very good, which means their RPI hasn't gotten tremendously high, which might make it difficult for them if they lose their conference tournament to make it in as an at-large team in the NCAA tournament, but we'll see. So maybe it's a similar type overvaluation, just not as much importance placed on it or attention or the whole thing. Not quite sure. But need to be very clear from the South Carolina perspective. They got to win the thing to get in the NCAA tournament at 27-27. I know the RPI would probably go up significantly if Carolina got to the finals and lost, but it doesn't erase 10 non-conference losses. It doesn't erase their record away from home, which has been ugly this year. And I think those factors are just too weighted at this point. There's too much in the account already to overcome from that perspective, unless the Gamecocks go on a near miracle run and win this SEC tournament, which is one of the reasons why I love college basketball tournaments, having seen these things. What Georgia was the last seed a bunch of years ago when Dennis Felton and company made the run, ended up making the NCAA tournament. I love those kind of things. I just hate it for those smaller schools that have a tremendous regular season, that are really, really good for months, have one bad game or something goes against them, and then they can't go to the NCAA tournament because of it. But I think I mentioned it yesterday, just having tournaments, and I was talking to some other old guys like me, some other dads that are being around playoff baseball now from a coach pitch or little league perspective, and how much fun it is. Great time of year from that perspective, from not just what we get to watch on TV and the pro sports and the NHL playoffs, the NBA playoffs, which another stinker last night, by the way. Oh, what a thumping the Celtics gave the Heat, huh? I mean, I turned it on. It's a 30-point game. I was like, oh, right. I hadn't paid that much attention to it. Not attached to the Eastern Conference Finals nearly as much as the Western Conference Finals. Celtics and Heat, not as fun to watch as the Mavs and Warriors, in my opinion. So I was just going to wait until maybe the fourth quarter or so, turn it on, beginning of the fourth quarter, 30-point game. What's going on here? Sorry, another rant. But not just to have those things, but to have the high school playoffs. I know, baseball perspective in South Carolina underway in the state championship series right now. And then the rec baseball ones too, man, to put kids in those positions and to see how they react. And the environments are a lot of fun. Now, if we can just get it to stop raining, we'll be good to go in the state of South Carolina perspective. Speaking of that, top quarterbacks in college football. Article out on 247sports.com about the top quarterbacks coming back to college football in 2022, and the state of South Carolina with 3 of the top 25. The state of South Carolina with 3 of the top 25 quarterbacks, according to 247 Sports, in the country for 2022. Now, obviously, in my head anyway, I immediately go to Clemson when you're talking about top-tier quarterbacks, just simply based on the track record. Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and then DJU was supposed to be that next guy. Clearly, he is not that next guy. He doesn't deserve to be talked about in the class of Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence based on what we've seen on the field. And last year was just shocking. I was also talking to my cousin I got to play a little golf with yesterday before we got rained out. And he's a big NC State guy. He's talking about how the schedule is always, 1 year. When it's at Clemson, it's that much more difficult for NC State to have a really good year. but how different it is going into this season after having seen what Clemson became last year with Uiagalelei not being able to get that offense really where it always has been. Not always has been, but where it has been, certainly under Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, and how much that changed the ACC, how fundamentally that opened up the league. And then we saw Pitt make the run, Wake Forest make the run, and it just was a different type of league. So I thought it was interesting that if you see different entities, right? This is the time of year, and you're going to see this more and more in the coming months where publications will do this, ESPN or CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports. Again, the list that I saw that's most recent, Brad Crawford coming up with his top 25 quarterbacks in the country. And I mentioned 3 state of South Carolina guys on there. DJ Uiagalelei, number 24, which, okay, I certainly think that is more based on reputation. That is more based on Clemson as opposed to production. But if you want to tell me he's going to be the 24th best quarterback in the country this year, I don't have a massive problem with that. He's got to improve, got to play better. But with everything that Clemson football has from an offensive perspective, weapons-wise, I think he certainly has the opportunity to do that. And I would also argue that he hasn't been the 24th best quarterback going in. But this is kind of more of a projection, I think, than it is based off of pure production. This is not, at least how I understood it, an NFL prospect list, which also gets done, right? Which is a different type of evaluation. For instance, I don't know if the top-ranked South Carolina quarterback, the top-ranked quarterback in the state of South Carolina returning for 2022 would necessarily get this high of number if this is purely a pro projection type deal, because that's Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina at number 7 in the country in returning college football quarterbacks for 2022 on this 24/7 sports list. One spot ahead of the University of South Carolina quarterback, Spencer Rattler, at number 8, which I think is a fascinating place to put him. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to compare to other lists out there around the country, because it's clearly based on his reputation coming out of high school as the number 1 guy, projected as the number 1 overall pick this time last year by a bunch of people, based off of early production at Oklahoma, not what you saw last year, ended up being 15 touchdown passes, I think 8 interceptions, something like that, before he was yanked for Caleb Williams, who, by the way, is all the way up at number 3 on the same list over at Southern Cal now, having made the move with his coach and gone out to Southern Cal. So that's another part of this. How do you project guys who haven't played, at least at that program? And a lot of these guys haven't played for a coach or maybe even at all, like a guy like Quinn Ewers. Remember that guy? I think it was about this time last year. Everybody's talking about Quinn Ewers. Maybe right before. Maybe it was a few months later. Maybe June, July. A guy that was forced with making a decision, and the figure that got floated out there was $1 million. He had $1 million offer to go play in college and cash in on the name, image, and likeness, or play his senior year of high school. And he reclassified and jumped, and I didn't blame him at all for making that move. I was trying to put myself in that position, put my child in that position, or any kind of family member, and that's pretty life-changing money, man. That was always the term that Ray Tanner used in these discussions about Gamecock baseball, either signees or guys in their junior seasons, third-year draft guys, that you got life-changing money in front of you, you don't turn that down. I guess it depends on the family to define exactly what that life-changing money is for each and every family, and I guess that can be different, but I didn't blame Quinn Ewers a bit for jumping to Ohio State, doing it a year early. I wasn't surprised a bit when he transferred. out of there, especially after how CJ Stroud played so well last year. And he's number 2 on this list, by the way. Number 2 returning quarterbacks in college football for 2022, according to 24/7 Sports, is CJ Stroud, who put up massive numbers, and Ohio State had another big season. But with Ewers being at number 18 on the list for Texas, that is kind of what these lists are about this time of year, is getting people to click or get interested to be talked about. So I'm falling for the trick. But that one is going to be one that's one you circle on the list of 25 to say, hey, is this gonna work? Because these transfers. So Bryce Young, number 1 at Alabama, the returning Heisman Trophy winner. CJ Stroud from Ohio State, number 2. And then you get transfers at 3 and 4. Caleb Williams from Oklahoma over to Southern Cal, but going with Lincoln Riley, that makes a lot of sense. Then number 4 is really interesting with Dylan Gabriel, the Central Florida transfer, going to Oklahoma and stepping in for Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler, with a defensive head coach coming over from Clemson and Brent Venables. That, to me, was a very interesting. That the first one that really made my eyebrows go up. Like Caleb Williams at number 3 was a little high, I thought. Dylan Gabriel, he did throw for more than 3,500 yards and 32 touchdowns, 4 picks at Central Florida in 2022. But now doing it at Oklahoma with all the pressure, with a completely different regime and Brent Venables, it's going to be fascinating to see. I did mention, by the way, Mark, Spencer Rattler, number 8 in the country for the South Carolina quarterback, which I can't remember if there has ever been a South Carolina quarterback to be ranked so high, specifically in quarterback rankings and returning going into a next year, even as great as Connor Shaw was, as I read Mark's comment, seems fair. To me, that seems awfully high. I guess if you're going based off of just Rattler's resume, it can seem fair. But based off of what I saw of South Carolina's offense, it's kind of where I'm going there. And I know year to year, man, these things can be drastically different. And I guess if I had seen Marcus Satterfield and his proven system in another Power 5 year, having had a quarterback with really good production, then I'd be like, yeah, that's fair. This seems high to me. Number 8 in the country. But I think the list in general from 24/7 Sports, awfully SEC and ACC heavy, with 8 quarterbacks in each league combining to make up the 16 out of the 25 names. 8 SEC quarterbacks. I'll run the list down for you. Bryce Young at Alabama. KJ Jefferson is number 5 overall at Arkansas. Then Hendon Hooker right behind him from Tennessee, number 6 returning quarterback. Spencer Rattler from South Carolina. Going down the list here, Will Rogers at Mississippi State at number 14. Will Levis from Kentucky right behind him at 15. Jackson Dart, relatively unproven, number 19 from Ole Miss. Anthony Richardson, I would say relatively unremarkable, maybe last year for Florida, but at number 20. And those are all the SEC guys. I believe that was up to 8. Now the ACC guys, a guy like Sam Hartman, to me at 11, it seemed a little low. But 8 ACC quarterbacks as well. The top one being Devin Leary from NC State, number 9. Tyler Van Dyke right behind him, the Miami quarterback at 10. Hartman from Wake at 11. Brennan Armstrong from Virginia at 12. So they go on a run of 4 in a row from the ACC right there, 9 through 12. You got Malik Cunningham at 17 from Louisville to go along with DJU from Clemson. The ACC quarterbacks there, and it looks like I might be missing, I think I'm missing the Pitt quarterback in on the list, and maybe one more from the ACC. But a big-time year for quarterback expectations, which I think always translates to team offense and team expectations, right? You got a good quarterback coming back. I think a lot of college football programs feel good about their chances. That's where Clemson's in a weird spot, right? I don't think we can go and say DJU is a bad quarterback, but I think we have all definitely seen he is not what they've had in the two quarterbacks before, which is going to be nearly impossible to begin with. But when hearing the hype, and I think not tamped down very much by the coaching staff, and knowing what the offense has been, just seeing it at a different level. Yeah. And Mark says Anthony Richardson being that high, I don't understand. Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's what these lists, again, are all about, though. Getting people talking, because what's going on in Florida right now going to be fascinating to see, too, with Billy Napier stepping in, trying to clean up some of that mess, at least publicly, it seems. And I shouldn't say at least publicly, it seems. It was a bit of a mess, for sure, the end of the era there. And knowing what the offense was supposed to be in the last several years for Florida, never got there. But Richardson did kind of supplant, did I guess, plant himself firmly in that number one spot. But Emory Jones now transferring out, and something to prove for him, for sure. Always really talented guy. What Florida can become in 2022, based on the expectations that Florida always have, how patient that fan base will be with him, pretty fascinating. And Mark says, oh, yeah, if we're going based on the combination of the South Carolina offense and Spencer Rattler's track record, fringe top 25. And I think that's what you have to base this off of, don't you? I mean, to me, that's the point. Especially if you're not doing an NFL quarterback prospect evaluation, you're doing it. Top quarterbacks coming back. To me, that's what that is, right? Most productive guys, how productive they're going to be, projecting that productivity in 2022. So to see Grayson McCall from Coastal at number 7, I think is very fair based off of what he's done in his career. And it's been talked about a ton, deservedly so. The job that Jamie Chadwell has done at Coastal Carolina, that unique offense, and how seemingly ahead it is of defenses. How, these things go through cycles all the time, right? Spurrier was that guy back in the 90s, that his offense was just different than everybody else's and seemed to always have an answer. Jamie Chadwell seems to be the latest version of that, with kind of a spread option pass that defenses, they can't handle right now, or haven't been able to handle very well by and large. So Grayson McCall deserves it. Savell Newton, the former Gamecock, came on the show a couple of weeks ago, I think it is now, and mentioned how he couldn't put Spencer Rattler or DJ Uiagalelei ahead of Grayson McCall, and this list right on cue with that, right in step. And RL saying, how much of a difference is there in defense in the SEC and the defense in the Big 12? I think 1 through, you only have 10 in the Big 12 recently. You got 14 in the SEC. It's going to be a good question. To me, it's almost the offenses, I think, just have been really, really good. I don't think they have just taken advantage of defenses. Maybe that's certainly a part of it, right? If you're not playing as talented defenses week in and week out, you're going to put up more points. You're going to put up more yards. You're going to make more plays. You're going to be that much more high-powered. But it had been a fluke that Lincoln Riley's been able to do that at Oklahoma. I think he's going to continue to do that for the most part in the Pac-12. I guess the question could be, would he be able to do it in the SEC? Well, Alabama's offense has been pretty dang good. I mean, last year, just dominant. What was their average margin of victory in the SEC? It was ridiculous. I want to say it was somewhere around 30. And they did it with an SEC schedule. So I don't think the discrepancy is massive, let's say. Obviously, I do think the SEC has the best defense, the most athletes. The NFL draft clearly points that out every single year. It's clear evidence of that. SEC does have the best defenses of college football from a conference perspective, but Ole Miss has not been very good on defense for forever, right? Let's not whitewash it and say that 1 through 14, the Vandy defense, throw the South Carolina defense in there recently. These have not been the best defenses in college football. They don't deserve to be in that category. They just haven't earned it in the last several years. Now, I do give Clayton White a ton of credit for what he did in year number 1 in shoring that thing up and being competitive as much as it was, and especially, man, what they did to Sam Howell in North Carolina in the bowl game. I know it's the last one, and it's easy to stick out the most, but that was impressive stuff. RL adds he loves that Rattlers got Austin Stogner coming over with him from Oklahoma. Going to be fascinating to see what kind of production Stogner can give the Gamecocks at tight end, because the tight end numbers have not been there for a long, long time in a lot of ways. Hayden Hurst put up some numbers for sure. A really good player. Nick Muse did get drafted in the NFL. There's a reason he's going to be a Minnesota Viking. Good player, but from a numbers perspective, to compare South Carolina's tight end numbers to a lot of other to some of these other programs that have had guys amongst the national leaders, they just haven't been close in a lot of ways. And I know there's always been a lot of emphasis, and to have Jaheim Bell coming back now, and I don't know if they're technically even going to label him as a tight end. So that might have something to do with how we perceive this year's offense. But having both those guys as options is going to be big. But Stagner's going to have to produce, and Rattler's going to have to execute and limit mistakes and the whole thing. And can the offense this year find a rhythm that it just never seemed to find outside of that bowl game last year? How much difference will Spencer Rattler, a quarterback, make? Because last year it was no doubt pieced together, and the Zeb Nolan thing was incredible. The Jason Brown story is incredible. Luke Doty going down, playing through injury, coming back, and then being done for the season. I mean, all that stuff. That happened. That made it massively difficult for a first-year coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, a first-year head coach in Shane Beamer. No doubt about it. Now this year seems to be set up much differently, right? Not in the first year of installing an offense. Not question marks around the starting quarterback. But again, there weren't question marks this time going into last year either. It was Luke Doty's job, and coming into his own and being a good leader, a great athlete, and the whole thing. But the quarterback projections, at least one list, I don't know if it would not have been the same type of list from 24/7 Sports. It was a different service that did all starting quarterbacks from every program in major college football, the 130 programs, and Doty was 100 plus going into last season. So a massive difference in having Spencer Rattler leading the way this year at number 8 in this one list. And maybe it won't be that high in some other lists, but I don't think he gets outside of the top 30. I think that would be pretty silly. That would be based maybe too much on what we saw from the South Carolina offense last year as opposed to who Spencer Rattler has been. But you just compare that to last season going in, the national expectation for sure, at least at that position, couldn't be much bigger. So interesting to see this quarterback list from 247sports.com. Again, from the South Carolina specific perspective, number 7 returning quarterback in college football, Grayson McCall at Coastal Carolina. Number 8, Spencer Rattler, the transfer from Oklahoma at South Carolina. And number 24, DJ Uiagalelei from Clemson. 8 ACC quarterbacks, 8 SEC quarterbacks. To me, that translates to a really fun year of some guys that we can really wrap our arms around, wrap our brains around, get familiar with, understand the identity of. That's another part of the problem last year, is that you didn't have any consistency at quarterback. So it was really tough for your offense to get an identity because you had a different guy in there pretty often and different skill sets, right? Zeb Nolan's skill set different than Luke Doty's. Jason Brown, kind of a combination of those guys maybe in between. Dakereon Joyner comes out in the bowl game and looks like he should be playing quarterback for Oklahoma and be a Heisman Trophy winner. So what are we going to see this year? I don't know, man. I don't know. But I know having a guy like Spencer Rattler just in your program, a massive boon to Shane Beamer and Gamecock football. Now, it also means raised expectations in the whole thing. But like Ray Tanner always said when he was the coach of the Gamecock baseball team, he didn't want to be in a program that didn't have big-time expectations. It does come with negatives as a coach. It comes with pressure and the whole thing, but that's what you want when you're in those positions. Speaking of that, the headlining news in South Carolina, the Athletic Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame holding its, I was going to say annual ceremonies. It typically is an annual ceremony, but last night inducting officially the class of 2020 and the class of 2022 because of COVID issues from a couple of years ago, and familiar names across the board there. Todd Ellis from the Gamecocks, Sidney Rice from the Gamecocks, CJ Spiller, and Peter Boulware. CJ Spiller from Clemson, Boulware from Spring Valley High School, Florida State in college, the Baltimore Ravens for a bunch of years in the NFL. Now back in town with the car dealership, and the Boulware family has always been a right at the top when you're talking about Columbia football families. It wasn't just Peter, it was his brother Michael after him, who went on to Florida State in the NFL as well. I got to see him play a little bit at Spring Valley. I mean, just tremendous on both sides of the ball in his career. Wide receiver and then in the secondary, and goes on to have a good NFL career too. I think a couple of Super Bowl rings with Seattle. But every year about this time is the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I've been to a bunch of them through the years, and to hear the stories, to hear the speeches, to see the reaction from not just those who are inducted, but the appreciation maybe from fans or the memories that are sparked, the stories that are sparked. Always an interesting part of the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. This time of year in a lot of ways got me thinking about a bit of an outside the box question today about your personal first ballot Hall of Fame class. Pretty positive. Cooperstown did it with 5 original members, Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb amongst them. So I went with a 5 vote class, your first ballot in your Hall of Fame. First one being a sports team, player, or coach. My vote went to Michael Jordan. Wasn't really close. Number 2, a world leader or historical figure. I went Abraham Lincoln, assuming that Jesus is off the board and a given for a lot of us. Number 3, fictional character, TV show, and movie. I went with Seinfeld. Not necessarily Jerry Seinfeld, but the show Seinfeld encompasses everything. We've already gotten another vote for Kramer today. 4, food, I go with barbecue. We've had steak in today, sushi, seafood, or scallops, if we had to be specific from some of you. And a write-in vote, I went with Mom. Troy's gone with his dad. We got water in from Justin, a great write-in vote. Some great votes in today. So appreciate you guys playing along. Feel free, if you haven't yet, to weigh in there. York weighing in with Kayla Boulware as a runner. I'm guessing maybe Michael and Peter's sister. Thank you for keeping me straight on that one and making sure I give full credit to the Boulware family. At Tim Hill UFA, where you can weigh in on Twitter. Got a couple of more lists here I wanted to get to. So Dan weighs in, goes with his sports vote to Pete Maravich. Great one. Boy, love The Pistol. Love that movie. And unfortunately didn't get to see Pete Maravich play. A little too young. But love that movie, and was that kid that slept with the basketball in the bed because the Pistol did it and the whole thing for a little while. Tried to carry it everywhere I went. Teddy Roosevelt, Dan's vote for the historical figure. Apparently he's walking softly and carrying a big stick. James Bond First vote, he says Sean Connery or Daniel Craig. Well done. I like what you're doing there. First vote for James Bond. Oh, the eggplant parmesan as the food. Dan and I firmly disagree on that one. I mean, I kind of love everything that goes around the eggplant parmesan, but the eggplant itself, I don't know what's going on there. And he just goes simply, I assume he's a big Giants fan, the David Tyree helmet catch as his write-in vote. First ballot, Hall of Fame. Beautiful. Love how he's playing along there. Thank you to Dan on Twitter. Matt Barber also weighing in on Twitter today. Former Sports Talk Radio host in the South Carolina and Columbia in multiple ways. Matt goes with Vince Lombardi as his vote for the sports figure. He goes with Paul as the historical figure. I'm guessing he's going with St. Paul there. Costanza as the TV vote. Brisket for number 4, very similar to my barbecue vote. And then Spartan David Goodlett the 5th. No idea. I'm going to have to look him up. You guys help me out with that one if you can. I mean, I don't even know if those words actually go in order. Never heard them before in my life. Spartan. This is in real time here, people. This is how we do the show. This is what live streaming is all about. Let's all learn together. Maybe you guys can help me. Good. Not a good sign that it's not even popping up as I'm typing it in the old Google. All right. Okay, here we go. Biographic profiles in the Civil War. Okay. Yep. I'm getting there. It looks like a Civil War figure. Maybe Matt could give us some more details on that. But again, this is what you get when you throw it out there. The fill in the blank poll question, if you will. That's why I love doing it. Get some outside the box answers, and would love to get a few more as we continue on today. Oh, and the SEC, now that I'm seeing, this is courtesy of Mike Gillespie, my buddy over at ABC Columbia. The SEC tournament's already delayed. Looks like the first game that was set to get going at 10:30 our time did not get going until 10:45. Let me double check that it did actually get going at that time. A 15-minute delay is nothing when it comes to SEC tournament stuff. And it looks like they are underway out in Hoover with Alabama taking the early lead on Georgia. Bama, the 11 seed, and Georgia, the 6 seed. And, okay, they went with a start time TBA, I guess, but it looks like they're underway, and they just had a highlight pop up there, so I'm guessing they might have just gotten started. Let's see if I can get a time here, somewhere around 11 or so, so an hour and a half delay, which would mean the Gamecocks probably now not set to play until about 3:30 or so this afternoon, pushing everything back, and this is what happens, man. May baseball all over the place. Another reason why conference tournaments are tricky for sure in so many ways, and especially if you get that late game. I know Trey Dyson was messing with us and said, yeah, it was too sunny. That's why the Gamecocks can never win at the SEC tournament, never played any night games. But there certainly have been some night games through the years where the Gamecocks have been in that late game spot, and there have been some games that have gone on well after midnight through the years. So what happens today, who knows? Who knows? We'll see what happens there. So your personal Hall of Fame stuff, really appreciate that. Wanted to get into another college football story. Have you guys seen this? I am not, believe it or not, I am not a big politics guy. Not a big, hey, I got to watch the news guy. Having worked with a local TV station that had a newsroom for so many years, I felt I was always kind of around it, and it kind of seeped its way in if it was really important. So I didn't have to go out seeking it. Then where we've gotten to in the world in a lot of ways, how fractured we are and the whole thing, don't necessarily know who to trust and the whole deal. In my personal situation, having kind of ended up getting fired for not getting the COVID-19 vaccine, and I guess kind of the implications of that, or I don't know, just another example to me of how all over the place we are from a news perspective in this country. And this one, is another example. Nebraska football will no longer be handing out red balloons and sending them off when they score their first touchdown of the game. I didn't even know this was the tradition there, but it reminds me of, I guess, Clemson. They do this when they run down the hill, right? The balloons go up, the orange balloons. But because there is a helium shortage, and according to the article I read, the athletics director, Trev Alberts, there at Nebraska, mentioning I guess, I don't think he mentioned it specifically, but just did mention that it's difficult to get helium now, and how I think the hospital system around the University of Nebraska needs it, and it can't be kind of battling the football program, the athletics department for helium, and especially during football season where they need it and the whole thing. They're just not going to do it. But apparently this is a result of Russia being one of the world's largest helium producers, and the conflict with Ukraine and the whole deal. So a direct implication from politics on the college football world. Oh no, here we go. RL says, I do have a conspiracy theory about the helium shortage. I'm sure you do, RL. Feel free to throw it out there if you would like. And if not, I'm good with that too. But a sad story for Nebraska fans, I'm sure, who are accustomed to letting those balloons go. The first touchdown of every game, they hand them out going in. Pretty cool tradition, and Nebraska being one of those places that I know South Carolina played at back in the 80s, almost went out there and won. It was Rob DeBoer being from Nebraska that I always thought was really cool, and a fan favorite, obviously, during his playing days in the 80s as running back and fullback, however you want to put it. A guy who really ran hard. And my dad made that trip with Gamecock fans out to Lincoln, Nebraska, back in the heyday of that big red machine, and Nebraska football being at the top of the list, certainly on the short list of college football powerhouse programs. The way that South Carolina almost pulled an upset that day, and how well he was treated by the fans, and what a great experience he had. He always told me about that one. That stuck with me for sure. I can kind of echo the feeling of going out to Nebraska, covering South Carolina baseball for 5 College World Series, and just how they embraced the event. It's fantastic, the whole deal. And now seeing that there is a political implication on their college football tradition, this is a classic 2022, I feel like. This is right where we are. RL just lets us know helium's been in high demand and shorter supply since at least 2017. Had no idea. All I know is that one time I went to the dollar store and they were replacing it. They had just replaced their tank so I could get balloons for a little birthday party. So that was a close call for me. Had no idea. Don't keep track on the helium supply in the world. Appreciate that. Troy, thanks for the kudos there. But man, this is 2022 quintessential stuff. No balloons at Nebraska. Can't get helium. Never thought that would be a sentence I would say. Also, never thought I would really be sitting here on the internet, getting ready to welcome in one of my longtime buddies, one of my oldest friends in the old TV radio business. There he is, out there in Texas. My buddy John Wilson from KBTV. Where are you? You're not at work right now, John. You already talked to Texas A&M guys today. Is that how much you're working?
Well, I did not talk to the Texas A&M guys, but we're having some internet issues at our house, so I came to work to use their internet to make sure we could visit. It's been too long.
What a pro. What an absolute pro. That's exactly what I expect from you. Now, having John on today, multiple reasons. First of all, South Carolina baseball will end up playing Texas A&M in the SEC tournament if they win today, if they even end up playing today. We already had a delay going on in Hoover, I've seen, but this game number 2 should happen. Well, why don't we start with Texas A&M and Jim Schlossnagle from the baseball perspective, but certainly want to get into Jimbo, what's been going on with him in the news here recently and the cluster that's been. What kind of guy is Schlossnagle, man? He's a name I think that we're all familiar with just because it's such a unique name. He's had a bunch of success at TCU, comes over and clearly has had a great year so far to start his Texas A&M career.
A remarkable year. To be able to do what they've done with really one starter in the SEC and yet to win this many series and to get in a position to be a top 8 national seed is remarkable. You know, Tim, sometimes we have guys that have had success at other places and you wonder when they transition, can they have it there? Schlossnagle had great success at TCU. He just seems, it may be different names and faces, but just picked up right where he left off with that success at TCU. Did a lot of it through the transfer portal, some with the guys that are here. He has said it before. I'll be interested to see how it plays out in Hoover. It's hard to slug your way to Omaha. You're going to have to be able to pitch, but Nathan Detmer, their Friday night starter, has really been the only consistent starter, and then they just find a way to piece it together through the bullpen and just win series after series after series. It's been remarkable to watch.
Personality-wise, how would you term Schlossnagle?
Love him. He's open. He's honest. He'll answer a question. I think he's great to deal with. You can learn a lot about baseball. It's interesting to hear his philosophies compared maybe what we heard over the last decade plus with Rob Childress. They're different, but Schloss is a guy that I appreciate the fact that if you ask a question, he'll answer it.
Childress seemed more like I don't want to say a good old boy necessarily, but somewhere in that vein, pretty laid back and maybe low key. It's Schlossnagle that way, or is he a little bit more intense?
I think he's a little bit more intense, a little bit more upfront. I think Rob was intense. It was maybe more that inward intensity. But if you go talk to Rob's guys, and I'm sure Schloss's will too, they'd run through a wall for Rob. And Rob was back at the beginning of the year. Nebraska opened up at Sam Houston. So I was able to go over and visit with him a little bit. The catcher on one of Rob's teams works on Sam Houston's staff. When I got to the field, the two of them were out there talking. And I think that tells you everything that you need to know. The guys love Rob. They're different guys. Both have had success. They had epic battles in super regionals when Rob was at A&M and Schloss was at TCU. It'll be interesting to see if TCU factors into A&M's postseason road as we move forward towards Selection Monday. But they're different guys, but it just proves in college baseball, especially, you can have success in many different ways.
A&M's approach to the SEC tournament, where do you think that is right now with how they're sitting with the NCAA tournament?
Does the SEC tournament matter? That's the biggest question. And in baseball, I know that people will say in basketball it doesn't matter. They thought A&M's running the men's basketball tournament was enough to get them in the NCAA tournament, and it wasn't. If the SEC tournament matters, then they need to win at least a game. If it doesn't matter, then I think they're a top 8 national seed right now. I remember when A&M was talking about joining the SEC, and I asked you, what do you do? And you told me, if a team wins 20 games in the SEC, they are a lock to be a national seed because you will have won 2 out of 3. A&M is on that cusp, 19 wins. But you look at who the wins are over and where they were ranked and the top 25 wins that they have in the non-conference. Value those how you want. There's so many college baseball polls. Debate if Dallas Baptist or Texas State or Texas, where they were ranked or where they should be ranked. But as of right now, I think A&M is a top 8 national seed no matter what they do in Hoover. But if the committee values postseason tournaments, then I think a game or two would be in need to solidify that top 8 seed.
Yeah, I think from the South Carolina perspective, we would say, I think they'll be good no matter what. But it's going to be interesting, especially with Jim Schlossnagle having had a bunch of NCAA tournament success. A lot of people on that voting committee, plenty familiar with him. The facilities around Texas A&M as good as any that you're going to get there at Bluebell Park. I think there are a lot of things in Texas A&M's favors to host moving forward, no matter what they end up doing. Gamecock fans would love that if they didn't value it at all and just let South Carolina or whoever just move on.
I'll be interested to see who they throw. The regional part of the format of double elimination is where A&M, if they're going to have issues in the postseason, could have them. Again, they found a way to win 2 out of 3 in series in the SEC on the weekends. But there's only one sweep in there. There's only one 3-game winning streak, and you've got to win those 3 games to get out of regional. You're going to have to win those games in double elimination in Hoover. So with the pitching that they have, how much do you want to tax your bullpen to win an SEC championship or make a run? And I don't. I'll be interested to see if Nathan Detmer starts in their first game and they treat it like a normal rotation, or because it's short, that they would throw a day or two short. Would he go? It'll be interesting to see this announcement. I haven't heard yet.
Yeah, just from what you're saying, I'm going to be surprised now. We'll keep an eye on that for sure about Detmer. I'll be surprised if he goes early, and then I'll be surprised if he goes long. Just knowing what SEC coaches have done and how they parlayed success to the NCAA tournament, certainly valued that over SEC tournament success. I'm guessing Schlossnagle will do that. It just seems to make the most sense for college baseball, and it's a bit of a shame, but these conference tournaments, I would rather have them than not. But knowing that they're almost exhibition like for a lot of the teams that are in a position like Texas A&M is, where South Carolina had been for so many years. So it's kind of like icing on the cake, and you still get the cake for other programs, and they get a shot to make a run.
Well, I would say that it's a great spot for A&M to be in if they're going to approach it where we're in and our resume is our resume. Let some guys throw. Put them. How much more of a high pressure situation or regional type situation can you put a team in than playing in the SEC tournament in Hoover? And I don't care who's in the other dugout. Every team in the SEC has talent, and every team in the SEC can play good baseball and will be as good as team as you're going to see in regionals moving forward. So if there's a guy you think, man, we wonder where does he fit? Could he start? Could he be our third starter if we have to go into a regional that way? Let him go throw. I mean, what a great thing to be able to do right now.
Great to hear from Jason on the YouTube live stream. He says, "Morning, I got on late. We'll rewatch the first part of the show later." Hey, that's what you can do, Jason. No need to apologize, sir. Thanks for hopping on the YouTube live stream. I should introduce John Wilson to you. John works out at KBTX-TV. They're the only real local TV affiliate that's in right around the Texas A&M area in Bryan, right near College Station there. And you've been there, John. Oh man, you probably don't want to say how many years, right?
I've been here 18 years.
Oh yeah, 2004. I was thinking that.
Yep.
The reason I can do that math is John and I worked together from 2000 to 2003 in Abilene, Texas. So you guys hear my boring old go-to Abilene stories all the time. You can blame John Wilson for hiring me out there. He's the guy that made that happen. So John and I go way back, been through. We actually were really lucky. Do you remember what year it was, John? Was it 2011 that Texas A&M made it out to the College World Series? That sound right?
Well, yeah, it was the first year, and oddly enough, they played South Carolina.
Right. It was nuts from us to go from the same little newsroom sports office in Abilene, Texas, talking about high school football most of the time in there, to covering prospective college baseball programs playing in the first game out in Omaha. And the Gamecocks won that game, but Texas A&M ended up going back and winning a couple more to stick around, didn't they? No, they went 2-Q.
Nope.
That's what it was.
The 2 years that A&M has been to Omaha since I have covered them, they have lost both times. So they've gone. I'm 0-4.
Oof.
So if they were to make it to Omaha this year, I don't know if they'll send me or not. But it's a different coach, so depending on how they want to handle it. But if I remember right, that 2011 was the first year at the new stadium. First year at TD
that's what it was.
Ameritrade.
Exactly right.
So I think Carolina had won the national title the year before, and they would win it the next year as well.
Yeah, that was all part of that ridiculous run. It's like 22 teams in a row in the NCAA tournament. Ridiculous. And that other one that you brought up, man, like Texas A&M is a really good program, but the fact that they've gone 0-4 at the College World Series since you've been there at 18 years, I hope Gamecock fans can look at that and understand the ridiculous run Carolina was on and how the program has certainly come back to reality. Not that it's acceptable or an excuse or the whole thing, but that it just was going to be a natural result of coming off such an absolutely outstanding run. And now Texas A&M fans seem set up in baseball with Schlossnagle, I assume, massively happy with that move and the upgrade that they seemingly have and on the cusp of making this run. And now we got to get to the fun stuff, Joe.
I thought this might be coming.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was.
You were it. How many people were in the room of this relatively impromptu press conference? My guess was no more than 25, probably more like a dozen.
I would say you're right on. I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's probably between 10 and 20.
Did you know what was coming?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it was pretty easy to put it together
No,
when
but
something gets called that quickly.
did you know it was going to come like that from Jimbo?
Well, I don't know that it was quite to the degree that he went, but I've seen him when he's defending things before, and Jimbo's a pretty passionate guy. And so, not to the degree that it came out. I did kind of stand there for a second when we were done and thought, I just want to air all of this. There's no reason to cut this up. People just need to watch the whole, and it wasn't even 10 minutes long. I think it was just over 9 minutes long. They just need to watch it in its entirety, and you can watch it over and over and over, and you'll learn something different.
So when he started and he threw out despicable in the first few seconds,
Yep.
did you guys kind of look at each other and say, here we go? Or was it more like, hey, we got to make sure I'm hitting record on this thing?
Well, it's funny you say that. That was the first thing I did was look in my viewfinder to make sure I saw REC, and it was recording, which was good. I'm trying to write down on my log pad as fast as I can, and then I just put it down and said, I'm going to miss something. I'll just go back and look later.
I've seen you spell before. There ain't no way you can spell despicable correctly, right?
No. DISC period.
DISC.
And then as long as I can read it, that's what mattered. But, when he gets going, sometimes you just have to put it down and listen and just hear what he's saying and take it for what it's worth. And when we were done, I kind of just stood there and thought, okay, this is going to be a national story for several days. So let's go.
I think it's even bigger than that, John. I mean, it definitely has become that, but I think it's very fair to say I don't know if we've ever seen that before in college football.
It kind of isn't there the unwritten rule that coaches don't run over coaches? I mean, you don't do that.
Well, that's not a coaching thing, John. That's a professional thing, right?
Sure.
You don't burn your bridges professionally, no matter what profession you're in. It's not something that is wise to do, but especially you don't do it with the big dog, the guy at the top.
Here's what I thought as I was driving back from it. I love the fact that he stood up for his coaches, because you're basically saying, if you're going to say you bought players, that your staff didn't go out and recruit well. Okay. So I love the fact that he stood up for his coaches that are great recruiters. He stood up for his kids, who you put in question that they take money, and their families. I love all of that. I think it's exactly what coaches should do for their staff, their players, and their families. I was a little surprised about the go dig into his past, basically calling him a cheater too. Whether that's true or not is a whole separate issue. But that was the only thing I thought, that one I really didn't see coming.
That was that, and then the words that he chose to use as well, the despicable narcissist. We make him out to be God. Go check into what God has done and the whole thing. To me, that's where it went from a relatively ordinary thing where one coach says something about your program, you stand up for it. I get that. You got to defend your program, and coaches have done that since the beginning of time. We'll do that till the end of time. But he made it personal, and he did it in a way, John, that I think most of us who have followed Nick Saban and respect his success in Alabama and the program and all of that also have seen to a certain extent and made us not necessarily like the guy. And I think that's where a lot of people were just pumping their fist and saying, yes, Jimbo.
So you have the number one recruiting class in the country. And if you go and I know you, Tim, you will have seen what Nick said. And it's a very short thing, but it's the way it was said. We had the number 2 class in the country. They were number 1. They bought every single player. It insinuates that there's no way that Texas A&M could have the number 1 recruiting class over Alabama. There has to be something to it. Just as there's has to be, how did they beat Alabama? So you've beaten them. He got beat by another assistant, and then he got beat on the recruiting trail. So is he insinuating that there's something? So when Jimbo takes it personal, I understand, because in that very small window, he says, we were number 2, you were number 1, you bought it, as if you can't be this. This place hasn't been this, but this place can be this. And Jimbo, I think if you maybe Dabo at Clemson. I don't know the Clemson culture as well as I know A&M's, but to me in the country, there is not a better fit personality-wise and school-wise than Jimbo and Texas A&M. They just are built for one another. So it's a family thing, and when you get after somebody's family, then bar the gates because anything can happen.
And it did, and we
And
saw
it did.
and I'm kind of disappointed in myself that I'm taking so much joy in it and glee, but I'm gonna rationalize and say, man, I just love college football, and ultimately, these are two millionaires just kind of acting like kids and spoiled kids in a lot of ways and going after each other.
But college football's changed, Tim. The days of being able to watch people go out and recruit based on the schools, based on the coaching staff, based on development, based on winning tradition, and then, hey, you're going to get a chance to play a great bowl game. I mean, it sounds beautiful and it's great, but it's not going to change. I would love for bowl games to stay around. I love watching the December 22nd conference schools I've never heard of play one another. But those days are probably going to end. I hope they don't. But college football is changing. The way we recruit is changing. The way kids play is changing. And it's just, this is the way that it's going to be. I hope that it isn't where coaches are calling each other out like this. But eventually, you push somebody far enough, they're going to stand up and say, you know what, this is not how our program is. And to insinuate, hey, you bought your class. I mean, you didn't. That's maybe I am too close to the situation. But when you say you bought every player, that basically says you guys can't do anything. There has to be a reason. And I think that I could see why the reaction was the way it was.
John Wilson, KBTX-TV out in Bryan, Texas. College has covered College Station, the Texas A&M Aggie program for the last 18 years, like you mentioned. What did Nick Saban say that was wrong factually?
What's the fact that they bought players? Where is the fact that he never said how they did it? What did they do?
Right. Not having evidence to back it up is one thing. That doesn't mean that you said something wrong. I think that's where a lot of the country is. I know Steve Spurrier came out and said, yeah, did Saban say anything wrong? I understand the reaction. I get that. But to me, this is more of a semantics type deal than it is anything else. It's did you pay for play, which you can't do technically. And of course, no one is going to get caught doing that technically because you'd have to be the dumbest person out there ever. But did you present situations? I mean, I've talked to assistant coaches who have come out flat out and said, yes, this is the number one issue that players and families want to know in recruiting. Name, image, and likeness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, unfortunately, it translates in the real world to pay for play, right? We're going to be able to do this for you if you come here. So I guess my question is, how is this relationship between the collective and the athletics department going to evolve into being anything other than what it's become, which I think those of us from the outside see very clearly that, yes, you can set up that situation, get kids to come to your program because they know they're going to be guaranteed to get paid a certain amount of money more than other programs.
I guess the old school in me says when you say you bought a player, you handed him cash and you said, you come to school for this. I guess the handing the cash now is later. You're handing him an opportunity rather than when you and I were growing up, it was the bags of cash or the briefcase of cash or the shoebox of cash, however they used to do that.
Or SMU, the envelope in the mail of cash like idiots, or a McDonald's bag of Tennessee.
We're not that far from SMU, and that will never happen again, the death penalty. But I think that when you say you bought players, that's my first thought is you're saying you immediately just gave them cash and said, you come here. And that didn't happen. If schools, whether it's A&M or insert any other school that you want to, is adjusting their recruiting to what the landscape of college football is today, is that wrong?
No, definitely not. The problem here, the blame all lies with the NCAA and the rule makers. You never set up anything to create an environment where there could be oversight. That's your fault. I don't blame Jimbo Fisher. I think Texas A&M and their collective here has just done it better than everybody else. And you're seeing some sour grapes, and that's what Jimbo rightly pointed out, that when he's not getting his way, the narcissist in him doesn't let it happen in the whole deal. My question to you, John, is do you have any idea how Texas A&M jumped out in front of everybody from that collective standpoint other than just having a bunch of money?
I don't, and that would be my first thing, is that they have a large group of donors that can do things like that. Look at the facilities that they've built. They're about to start building more of them to go with football, a new indoor facility, a new indoor track, a new academic center. They're built everything around Kyle Field is going to look completely different in the coming years. So I think maybe they just had a group that has been out in front of NIL and has done a really good job of it. To sit here and tell you, Tim, that I am a recruiting guy, I am not. I'm not as big a follower of recruiting. I knew A&M had the number one class. I can tell you maybe a couple of names that are in the signing class right now. I know that it's a huge business and it's the way your programs are built, but now it isn't just recruiting anymore. Now you're going to recruit to keep your guys on the team, because they may get an NIL deal now from Alabama. Hey, we'll offer you this. And if I remember correctly, at SEC Media Day a year ago, when NIL was a huge deal, I think Nick Saban may have been one that said his quarterback was going to get, I don't remember what the number was,
$1 million.
So that was brought up
for sure. Well, that's why I say all this is kind of just semantics between these two, and the buying of the players and defending the 17-year-old families is a bit disingenuous, I think, from the outside. I get it. You got to do it. And my guess is that everyone around Texas A&M loved how Jimbo Fisher reacted.
Absolutely. I mean, again, you have a coach that was willing to stand up for your school, because he said in the press conference, you've now brought the name against Texas A&M. I mean, you've said this about the school, about A&M. He loves the brand. He loves the school. I don't know who would not be proud of their coach standing up for what he believes in. And maybe Coach Spurrier's right in the fact that, what did Coach Saban say that was wrong? Maybe he didn't say anything wrong. Maybe the way he said it, that you bought players, because that insinuates that that's something that's illegal. And I don't know that Texas A&M, and Jimbo made it very clear, they did nothing illegal. Maybe, and I imagine the old school coaches, this is going to take a while to get used to. This is the way we recruit now. I mean, who would have ever thought? I had to go look up what collective meant.
Right.
Like, I didn't even know what it was.
I
just don't get into that. And I certainly can't spell it. So it just changes. And it seems like this name, image, and likeness, and things that go with recruiting and being an athlete, it changes by the day. And it's tough, but things are just changing. And the way that, you have young kids, Tim, imagine if they're fortunate enough to be recruited, what are they going to have to deal with when they get recruited? And your family, what are you guys going to have to deal with? Or even people that you cover right now that have kids that are in high school that are good athletes, what are they having to deal with? I mean, I can't imagine the pressures that go on kids and their families with all of these different things coming at them. I thought it was bad enough in the old days, but now with all of this stuff above board, there's just has to be so many things that are thrown at them. And I think everybody will agree there needs to be some sort of uniform ruling of, this is what we're doing.
Yeah,
will that help? I don't know, but it should at least try.
York weighing in on the YouTube live stream. Trust that Saban will adjust. He was putting Bama businesses on notice. No doubt about it. Oh, most
absolutely
coach ever, right?
Sure. And there's been a debate, and I'd be interested what you think. This was out of Nick Saban's character to say something like this, but I never believe that he doesn't have a purpose for what he does. Was saying A&M bought all of their players a cue for something else? I don't think it just slipped out. I don't think you get to be in the position that Nick Saban is in by just letting things slip out.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt about it. This was a message to his boosters. Deion Sanders put it very clear, right? He wasn't talking to Jackson State. He wasn't talking to Texas A&M. He was talking to his fans. And also, he can't publicly say that and then privately apologize. That ain't how it works. And I love Deion Sanders for that, for sure. So, John, I'm wondering from your perspective, having been in the state of Texas your entire life, basically, knowing that the Longhorns have had the richest athletic department for a long, long time and invested the most resources, that has not equaled championship after championship after championship, especially in football. It is my opinion that this name, image, and likeness deal, being able to do what Texas A&M did, will not equate to automatic success and championship levels, because you get guys coming into your program mainly for the dollars. I think you create your culture, your environment is going to be really, really difficult to manage, especially when you're talking about 85 scholarships. You're talking about transfer portal opportunities and the whole deal. That, to me, why I think this entire narrative of college football is only going to be more top heavy now because of name, image, and likeness, and it's going to be the balance of power is not fair at all. I think it's garbage, man. Where are you on this?
I think you can give everybody players. What do they do with them? If you gave me the top 22 freshmen in the country to go coach, you could give you the bottom 22. Who's going to develop them better?
Not
if
me.
You
man.
develop better than I do, and you put them in the positions to win, your 22 are probably going to be better than my 22. So it's still going to come down to coaching. It's still going to come down to, you got to get them on campus. That's fine. But what do you do with them when you get here? I'd be interested in the last 20 years to go back and look at the top 10 classes and put together the records for those schools.
Right. And most of them are pretty good. Like there is that stat out there that national championship winning programs have been in the top 5 in recruiting, at least for one of those classes, I think.
Right.
You got to have players. Don't get me wrong. I'm not Pollyanna and being all naive about this, but I think where we are as we continue to evolve in college football is that if you do set your program up and your collective is running your recruiting and the whole thing, well, I don't think these head coaches, these control-minded head coaches, who the Nick Sabans of the world, the control freaks that have always had all the power in the whole, I don't think they're going to be the best managers of all this. I think you're going to have a new approach to how you manage your college football program to go with this new world of recruiting like you're talking about.
You're still going to have guys that can evaluate too. They may see something in the kid that somebody else doesn't. I think one of the most popular stories around our part is there was a player that came to Texas A&M that was recruited at the University of Texas, and I believe they tried to recruit him as a defensive back. And A&M said, you know what, if you're quarterback, you want to come here, we want you to play quarterback. That kid was Johnny Manziel. So he wasn't a highly regarded. Did you hear his name recruiting? I only knew him because he played a high school team that we covered in the playoffs. I thought his name was Manziel. So, and I could spell his name, Tim, just so you'll know. I had to do it enough.
I before E?
Yes.
All right.
But, and I like Mark's comment. He is right. The top 22 players are always better over the bottom 22 players.
No doubt.
He is absolutely right. But I can't coach.
The question would be, right, that next tier of 22, or knowing that everybody's got the equal opportunity to get that top 22, as opposed to what it's been in years past, where it seems like only the top programs are going to have an equal opportunity to go after these guys. I mean, Spencer Rattler's at South Carolina. I think that's a great example of a guy who wouldn't have gone to a school, or maybe not have gone to a program, that ended up at a program outside of the traditional power brokers of college football.
No, and he could be a great fit at South Carolina. And what Shane Beamer did in his first year, I think, is fantastic. But the evaluation tool of a guy going out and seeing, I always ask these, I'm curious. When I go to a high school game and I see coaches on the sideline, I have no idea what they're looking for. Like, I can't evaluate a player. I know if they're good against the team that they're playing that night. Even I can know that if you rush for 200 yards, you probably had a really good game. But they're looking at something completely different. They may see a guy on the field that everybody else thinks is bad, and that kid's really good. We've heard those stories. So I think that the evaluation part of it is very good. And then what do you get them on campus? You can't, maybe I'm naive, but I think that on these lists of 300, the top 300 players in the country, that somewhere in the 500s is a really good player. We just don't know who he is because we don't go to 500. But Shane Beamer, Jimbo Fisher, Dabo Sweeney, some of these coaches and their staffs are going to be able to find those kids and then say they fit with what we do. And then you bring out the best in those kids. So you can have collectives, you can have name, image, and likeness, you can have great facilities, but can you find the players? There's the old saying, Tim, in there, they will find you. If you're good enough, they will find you. So coaches will find you. And if you're willing to put in the work and they are willing to put it into you, then you're going to have a lot of success, whether name, image, and likeness or money are there or not.
Yeah, I think that we're thinking about this in the wrong way. I think we're thinking about this in the old school way of where college programs have all the power over players. I think it's a great thing that players now get some of that back and will have the opportunity. Hey, if they feel like they're mistreated, they get to go somewhere else. Because guess what? That happens in the real world, man. If you feel like your employer is mistreating you, you can improve your professional situation. You might have some other stuff to deal with, but that is the real world too. And the college sports just hasn't been the real world in that way. And I think it's been so unfair for so long. A lot of us are just blinded to it.
It hasn't been. And I'd be interested not only to hear you, but some of your viewers and listeners as well, what they think about this, which is an issue that I've thought about a lot. Is I get what you're saying that the players need to be in control, but what about sticking it out? If you have a job that you don't like and you need to stick it out until you can find something new, is there the life lesson of learning about working your way from the third team to the second team to then becoming a starter? If you don't get enough playing time, well, I'll just go to the transfer portal. Is that a good thing? Those are things I struggle with. I don't know the right answer to it. I can see a player saying, you know what? I thought this was a good situation. It's not. I deserve a second chance. They're absolutely right. They do. But are we missing the life lessons? Are there life lessons, or are those the lessons that still need to be taught? I mean, I'd be interested to know what other people think too.
Well, I think it's individually based, right? I was talking to Corey Miller, just got in the University of South Carolina Hall of Fame, a longtime New York Giant linebacker, said when there was a coaching change at South Carolina, he would have left if there's a transfer portal. They were going to make him play with his hand in the dirt. He never done that before. Then I asked him, well, would you have become the player that you ended up becoming? And he said, I don't know. You're probably right. And then what you're talking about, the fortitude and the character and everything that develops, that's not going to go away. Guys are still going to choose to stay. I think it might not happen the way that it's happened before. It's not going to be probably to the level that it's happened before. But I think there's also something to be said for going to a new environment and adapting with all of that as well. The Spencer Rattler situation, and not penalizing a guy for having to sit out a year.
No. And because, again, a coach doesn't have to sit out a year.
Exactly.
And I know that people want to say you're committing to a school, not a coach. I think that's a lot easier said than done. I mean, you are committing to a coach because that's who you're going to play for. And students and athletes should have some control. I mean, it's crazy to me if I look up and I wear number 56 and there's 1,056 jerseys in the crowd and I can't go get a burger or see a movie after the game. It's kind of weird.
It ain't right. I'm glad it's getting closer to right. I'm not saying it's ideal or anywhere close to it, but I think avoiding worst case scenario or really getting taken advantage of is better than doing it because you're afraid of some other stuff happening. John, great stuff today, man. I really appreciate the insight, and it's fascinating to talk to someone who was in the room when Jimbo gave that thing. Is that the room, the room that I'll never forget in my professional career is being in the room when Tiger Woods was at Augusta National for his first public press conference after the whole golf club and the car accident the first time and the whole thing, the domestic situation, right?
Yep.
Everything that came
Probably
along.
a few more people in that room.
Yeah, there were probably about 100 or so. I think they let in maybe more than that. But just the feeling in that room, is that something that's going to stick with you for a while, the feel in that room?
Absolutely. I mean, just to sit there again, because you don't hear that. You don't hear coaches do that to each, and the immediacy of which the response came. It wasn't a day or two or maybe a week later before they said that. And it came quick and it came hard. And I mean, that's, I guess, the way that message wanted to be delivered. I'm assuming this was not just in reaction to that. It's probably a buildup of things. I don't know that, but the way it came. But no, I will never forget being in that room, and I'll never forget getting the message, "Hey, Jimbo," and we got it like a half hour before. It was called at about a half hour.
Right.
And thinking, I mean, this doesn't happen. Football coaches don't call press conferences and do it in a half hour. I mean, you've been around long enough to know these are very orchestrated things. And so then when I knew that Saban had said that, I thought, well, this has to be what it's about. I don't know. And then when he started, it's one of those ones that you almost just shut up and get out of the way
Absolutely.
because he's gonna take care of everything.
Oh yeah, that's my other question. A lot of reporters, kind of like I just did to you, were interrupted by Jimbo Fisher as they were trying to get stuff out. What was the reaction to those guys afterwards, kind of in the room?
Credit to them. They were the same way. Just be quiet and let him go. I mean, I think everybody was just kind of, what just happened? Like, this just happened. You knew what you heard, but I remember coming in and somebody said, "What did you think?" And I got to look at it again. And I sat down and watched it again to make sure that I didn't miss anything.
In shock.
You know how when you're recording and you got headphones on, you're listening, you're making sure everything is good, is it in frame, and then you think you hear something and you don't. But no, we clearly heard that, and I will always. There are certain press conferences, like you said, that you'll always remember. I'll remember Jimbo when he got introduced, getting his boots, holding those up. But this is one that will stick with you just because it may not have been long, but it was very impactful. That was a very impressive 8 to 9 minutes.
Did you ever?
That may change college football.
No doubt. Did you ever have your hand up? Were you ever going to be next in line for a question?
No.
Tom Rinaldi taught you that trick.
Yeah, that was a great one. I'm glad he was not in the room. I don't know if that would have gone well. But sometimes, like I said, you just have to get out of the way.
No doubt.
And what was I going to ask that he hasn't already said? I mean, but the narcissist, despicable, God complex, the czar of college football. There was nothing that my biggest question was answered within the first 20 seconds.
Oh, no doubt. Just the tone. You heard it all right there. And I was hoping to get you out on a couple of questions here. We're having fun with the Hall of Fame stuff today. South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame going. Okay. Got your first ballot Hall of Fame class personally. I got 5 spots for your class. All right.
Okay.
First spot.
Would be interesting. Okay.
In sports, I'm guessing I know who your name is. I went with Michael Jordan as a sports team player or coach. You're not going with the dream, are you?
No, I have somebody else I would go with that is still a Houston sports guy, but earlier than the dream. I'd have to go Earl Campbell.
Earl Campbell, great vote. Fantastic. That's why we have John Wilson on the program. Best tearaway jersey of all time. All right, now we're going outside the box. Okay. Making you maybe squirm a little bit on this one. World leader / historical figure. Who gets in as your first ballot Hall of Famer? I mentioned earlier that Jesus doesn't. He gets a pass here. I think most people would pick Jesus there. A lot of us.
That would be who I would have gone with. I think because it's close to here, and I have so much respect, it will be a controversial one.
I love it.
I'm not trying to talk politics, but I have an amazing respect for President Bush, number 41. What he did in his one term. I've been through his library here. Loved the fact that he stood for what he believed in, even if it went against him getting reelected. Always was around this A&M program. I think he was a Hall of Famer as a person more than a politician. So in my book, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. President Bush 41, absolutely.
HW, right? HW, not George W. Okay,
George H.W. Bush, yeah. And if you're ever in College Station and have a chance to go through the library, I'll give it a plug. It's worth it.
Okay. And number 3, class of 5 for your first ballot Hall of Famers, fictional character / TV show or movie.
You of all people should know my answer because I made you watch it at 4:30 every day.
It's Alex Trebek? You're going
King
to
Hill.
Oh.
We had to have all of our
Jeopardy.
work
That's
done.
right. Jeopardy was at 5, I think.
Yeah, we could watch King of the Hill.
Okay, does that mean you're going Hank Hill then? Hank Hill's your guy?
Yes.
Or
Hank
just
Hill
the
is
show,
my guy.
King of the Hill?
I would go just the show, but if you're going to make me pick the character, then I'll go.
Because I went Seinfeld as the show, King of the Hill.
Yes.
Well done.
King of the Hill for me is a
right.
first ballot Hall of Famer without question.
Number 4, food. Take it for what you will. I went barbecue. We've had a vote for brisket already in today.
Okay.
More of the Texas version of the barbecue. Where is that? Where you're going? You going somewhere?
Nope.
Oh, I love
I'm
it.
going chicken fried steak.
Oh, should have known. Chicken fried steak, another Texas staple. All right, now
It
we're
is.
opening it all up even more. 5, you just get a write-in vote for your first ballot Hall of Famer.
My
What?
wife.
Well done, sir. Well played.
No, I mean, she has to put up with me.
Right.
And we are in the process of preparing to move, and she's packing. That's a Hall of Famer.
While you're hanging out at work, talking on the internet.
Yep. I told her I was working.
Well done, sir.
So she is a Hall of Famer in my book, without a doubt.
Well played, man. Really appreciate all the insight, the perspective. Would love to have you back on. Talk to the people at the station. I know Daryl's the boss there. Get them working on the ceiling tiles behind you. We need to work on.
This is an office that they're working on, so it was a quiet place to go. So I just decided that I would hop in here. I didn't figure that ceiling tiles were going to be as important as my spelling. But before I go, I have to tell you, I am so happy that you're back doing this. The sports world, journalism world needs guys like you. I know it was a tough time, but I hope that this is a huge success. I hope the people that are watching you and listening to you understand the incredible guy that you are. You're good at this. You're better off of it as a husband and a dad. And I'm glad that you're back doing this. And if I can do anything to help you, let me know. We love talking sports, and it's great. But I've watched a little bit, and I see some of your posts of things that are maybe more world related, and I am behind you 100%. And I'm glad you're doing this, and I hope it goes like a big deal.
Oh, thanks, John Wilson. Checks in the mail, man. Great stuff.
No check.
KBTX-TV out in College Station, Bryan College Station, covering the Aggies, in the room when Jimbo had the press conference, and a great guy. John is a fantastic guy as well, and one of the reasons why I wanted to get back in this, knowing that a great guy like him has done it for a long time. And when I was making fun of his ceiling tiles, on cue, my garage opens and the 2-year-old is in. Hey, Andrew, you want to come get in? You want to say bye to the guys? Come on in, Andrew. Yeah, I should have been done. Going a little late today because John was on fire. He's got his bat. Let him bring the bat over. Don't make him cry. Come on in, Andrew. Yeah, you're going to hit. I know you are. You going to say hi to the guys?
Hi, baby.
Yeah, the baby. That'll do it. Can you say bye-bye?
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. We're done today. See you guys. Thanks for checking out this edition of Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent. Bye-bye.